Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Butler's our guest. I think I'll just show him around. No, I don't think I will kiss you. Although you need kissing badly.
Born in 1939, Gone with the Wind did not only appear as a film, but as a furious storm sweeping through the history of cinema, sweeping the audience into a whirlwind of violent love and war, and then engraving its name forever among immortal monuments. On the burning land of the American South, Scarlett O'Hara, the arrogant, calculating young lady, was thrown into the whirlwind of the Civil War and the Reconstruction period, where each layer of silk dresses, each luxurious ball quickly collapsed before the merciless downfall of a familiar order. In that setting, her love, pride, and will to survive became a fiery red thread, especially with the stormy love affair with Rhett Butler, the man who both understood and challenged all her limits. But behind the halo on the silver screen, Gone with the Wind also hid a series of shocking secrets, from the fierce battle for roles, the violent hidden conflicts on the set, to the truths that shook all of Hollywood. And now, it is time to lift the velvet curtain to step into the chaotic, dramatic, and shocking world never before revealed of this cinematic masterpiece. 1. The substitute collapsed. The set became hell. Victor Fleming entered the game as a reluctant saviour. He had just put aside The Wizard of Oz, a project equally exhausting, when he was immediately thrown straight into the giant machine called Gone with the Wind. But instead of being given a glorious opportunity, Fleming faced a nightmare. The budget swelling every day, the progress suffocated by Selznick's pressure, and a cast who had lost faith after the shock of George Cukor being fired. Day after day, Fleming was forced to work to exhaustion. The mounting pressure made him irritable, ready to shout on set, but that was only a shell to hide the collapse gnawing inside. At the peak, in the midst of the greatest chaos, he completely collapsed, a nervous breakdown that forced the production to pause. Selznick, in a panic, dragged Sam Wood in to patch up the schedule. In just a few months, the film went through 3 directors, each with a different style, a different perspective, leaving the set in disorder like a battlefield. And from that shock, the real whirlwind of chaos began to roll up. 2. A director prepared for 2 years, kicked out after 19 days of shooting. It sounds unbelievable, but it is exactly the truth. George Cukor, the director chosen with trust, who devoted 2 full years of his life to building every foundation for Gone with the Wind, was thrown out after only 19 days of shooting. He was the one who laid each first brick. From casting, shaping the character of Scarlett O'Hara, to inspiring the stars preparing to step into the roles of a lifetime. In the eyes of Vivien Leigh and Olivia de Havilland, he was almost the guiding soul of the whole project. But everything collapsed in the blink of an eye. David O. Selznick, the powerful producer, signed the dismissal outright. The reason announced to the press was summed up in 2 cold words: creative differences. But that was only a cover. Behind the scenes, a storm of rumours spread across Hollywood. Clark Gable, the #1 male star, had secretly pressured Selznick to eliminate
Bởi chỉ những thứ ta tự mình làm
The
nên
cause
thì
did
bản
not
thân mới
stop
có
at
tư cách đại diện
professional
cho.
disagreements. People whispered that Gable feared Cukor knew too much about his dark past. When he was just starting out in Hollywood, Gable was rumoured to have been a gigolo, living by serving wealthy ladies. Among those rumours, there was even the shadow of Cukor as a dangerous witness. When the dismissal decision was made, it was like a knife stabbing straight into the heart of the crew. The stability that Cukor had patiently built in 2 years collapsed, replaced by confusion and fear. No one believed their position was safe anymore. If a director attached from the very first day could be kicked out in less than 3 weeks, then everything could be crushed at any time. But all was still only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath that chaos was an even more terrifying force, the one who pulled all the strings behind the screen. 3. A producer addicted to pills, obsessively extreme David O. Selznick was the brain controlling Gone with the Wind, but at the same time the production's greatest nightmare. Day and night, he crammed himself with Benzedrine to stay alert, swallowed sleeping pills to force rest, chain-smoked, and drank to keep himself in a state of ready for battle. The addiction drove him into an inhuman grind, meals reduced to bananas and salted peanuts, because, in his view, proper meals only slow the schedule. Selznick did not direct the film. He forced it, detail by detail. Thousands of memos were fired off like a storm, documenting everything from how the camera panned to the shade of Vivien Leigh's eyeshadow. On some nights, he summoned the makeup artist just to argue about the colour of a gaze, draining the crew with his pathological obsessions. The press mocked the film as Selznick's folly, but to Selznick, this was a crusade against time and mediocrity, and from that extreme obsession, the leading man's tragedy began to surface. 4. Clark Gable, a symbol of masculinity but derided as disgusting. In the public eye, Clark Gable embodied masculine charm, the unruly Rhett Butler whom millions of women dreamed of. But behind the camera, the truth was shockingly raw. Vivien Leigh once confided to friends that she was revolted by kissing scenes with Gable. The reason was not feelings, but a horrifying fixation, his stifling breath. Gable suffered from severe dental disease to the point where his breath became torture for anyone who had to get close. Whenever the camera rolled, Leigh had to suppress herself, trying to swallow her disgust to become the ardent lover. The set was therefore always tense. The crew prepared mouthwash to reduce the odour, while Leigh tried to angle her face cleverly in close-ups to avoid her co-star's breath. What the audience saw was an immortal, passionate kiss, but for Leigh, it was an acting hell. And while the leads endured that bitter truth, another secret laid bare a raw reality about the legendary leading lady. 5. Vivien Leigh destroyed her body to keep the role. Are you impressed by the heroine's ultra-small waist in this famous film? In fact, behind that beautiful figure lay a painful truth. To embody Scarlett O'Hara with an 18-inch waist, as in the novel, Vivien Leigh accepted days of self-inflicted physical torment. Each day, she strapped herself into a corset so tight that even breathing was difficult, fainting many times right on set. Leigh's diet turned into a nightmare: bitter coffee instead of meals, cigarettes instead of food, amphetamines instead of energy. She survived the months of filming by iron will, but her body was depleted, leaving permanent marks on her skin and damage that would never heal. As the end neared, failing health dragged her psyche down. Fits of irritability, tears, and a fragile mental state became a dark shadow haunting the crew. Vivien Leigh traded youth and body to keep an immortal role, but the price was too high. And while the leading lady was crumbling, elsewhere on the set, a true catastrophe was being lit with fire. 6. A grand fire scene nearly burned all of Hollywood. The Atlanta conflagration on screen is one of the grandest scenes in film history, but few know that to create that wonder, Selznick ordered real flames across more than 10 acres. Dozens of mock buildings were set ablaze, with flames roaring over 200 feet high, lighting up the night sky. However, just as the cameras were capturing the iconic images, the wind suddenly picked up. The fire was swept out of control, licking over to MGM's real sound stages. Cameras melted, film stock warped from the heat, stunt performers suffered severe burns, and one person had to be hospitalized when their clothes caught fire. All of Hollywood was just one stronger gust away from disaster. What the audience remembers is the blazing spectacle, but the crew remembers the night when both dreams and horror erupted together in the flames. And when that fire died down, another tragedy appeared, this time from American letters themselves. 7. F. Scott Fitzgerald turned into a copying machine. Amid the whirlwind of a tangled script, Selznick turned to F. Scott Fitzgerald, the famed author of The Great Gatsby. Hollywood hoped a literary genius would breathe life into stiff pages. But instead of free creation, Fitzgerald was forced into an absurd task. He was only allowed to use verbatim dialogue from Margaret Mitchell's novel. That work turned him into a giant copying machine, digging for each sentence and stitching them into a screenplay. For an inspired writer like Fitzgerald, this was nothing short of an insult. He soon collapsed in humiliation, leaving the project before he could leave a mark. His departure plunged the script back into chaos, forcing Selznick to find one last firefighter, a man who would enter a death race to rewrite everything in just 1 week. 8. Another screenwriter had to rewrite the script in 1 week without sleep. The name called was Ben Hecht, a renowned screenwriter who had never read Gone with the Wind. Selznick had no choice. He locked Hecht in a room with director Victor Fleming, then recounted the entire plot for an hour, like someone reciting scripture with breathless urgency. Hecht began to write, day and night without sleep, his hands trembling with exhaustion. For 7 hellish days, he worked 18 to 24 hours straight, living only on bananas, salted peanuts, and stimulants supplied by Selznick. Fleming and Selznick acted out each scene in front of him for him to set into dialogue. In the midst of that madness, Hecht produced the final draft, the backbone of the immortal film. But in exchange, both he and the crew paid with exhaustion. And once the script took shape, the bitter truth about the film's only black star left Hollywood gassed. 9. Hattie McDaniel made history but was still humiliated. In 1940, Hollywood was stunned when Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, became the first black actor in history to win an Oscar. That moment should have been the pinnacle of glory, but the reality was cruel. The ceremony was held at a lavish Los Angeles hotel that still enforced segregation. McDaniel, though a central figure of the night, was forced to sit separately at a small table at the back of the hall, far from Hollywood's A-list stars. Worse, other black actors in the film were not even allowed to enter. McDaniel's eyes welled with tears on stage as she spoke, but the shimmer of the statuette could not hide the humiliation she bore. That historic night was both radiant and bitter, leaving a stain hard to wash away for all of Hollywood. And the discrimination did not only appear at the awards, it haunted the film's grand premiere itself. 10. A lavish premiere riddled with racial discrimination, Atlanta in December 1939 turned into a festival. More than 300,000 people poured into the streets, parading, singing, the city awash with flags, as if the Civil War era had come alive. Hollywood stars stepped out of limousines to cheers, flashes flaring. A scene unprecedented in film history. But amid that brilliance existed a harsh darkness. Jim Crow laws. The entire black cast, including Hattie McDaniel, was barred from attending the premiere in the very city where the story is set. Clark Gable, outraged at the injustice, once declared he would boycott the event. But McDaniel herself, the one most deeply hurt, persuaded him to go because she understood this film needed to be honoured. That premiere is recorded by history with both grandeur and the stain of bigotry. And the injustice was not only in attitudes, it was starkly visible in every paycheck. 11. A pay gap that sparked outrage. Behind the glittering screen, cold numbers revealed an infuriating truth. Clark Gable worked only 71 days, yet pocketed $125,000, an enormous sum for the 1930s. Meanwhile, Vivien Leigh, the lead who bore almost the entire weight of the film, shot for 125 days, 50 more than Gable, but received a mere $25,000. The unfairness did not stop there. Black actors, including Hattie McDaniel, who entered history with an Oscar, received meagre, almost token pay. The gaps of gender and race stood out, as cruel as a blade slicing across the glow of triumph. And while the numbers enraged the public, the set nearly became a place of mourning because of a deadly accident. 12. The male star nearly lost his life on horseback. In a pivotal scene, Clark Gable rode with the poise of a powerful gentleman. But before the camera could stop, the horse suddenly bolted wildly. Gable was thrown, slammed hard to the ground, and lay unconscious for minutes. The set froze, thinking they had just witnessed the greatest tragedy in Hollywood history. Doctors confirmed he had a concussion, persistent headaches, and memory disturbance. Yet under the crushing schedule, Gable refused to rest, forcing himself to continue. Many moments of Rhett Butler's quietness and weary gaze on screen were not acting. They were the marks of real injury. Death had brushed past the set, only to give way to another nightmare, born of Selznick's frenzied perfectionism. 13. An iconic scene forced to shoot at 2:30 a.m. for a week. The "As God is my witness" scene, Scarlett O'Hara raising her hand in oath at dawn, is considered an immortal cinematic moment. But to obtain that perfect light, Selznick turned the crew into prisoners of an inhumane schedule. He forced Vivien Leigh and hundreds of technicians to wake at 2:30 a.m., 7 days in a row, just to catch the first sun. Already exhausted by corsets and a harsh diet, Leigh was pushed to the brink. She sobbed over the phone to Laurence Olivier, vowing she never wanted to make films again. The set drowned in suffocating tension as each passing day drained the entire crew. And while the leading lady was spent in that artificial dawn, another colleague chose to resist with open contempt for the film itself. Leslie Howard considered the film trash. While all Hollywood was in a frenzy over Gone with the Wind, Leslie Howard, who played Ashley Wilkes, showed open disdain. He considered the script an overblown embellishment, a piece of racist propaganda dressed up as romance. Throughout shooting, Howard was listless and sullen, constantly complaining to friends that he was trapped in a dull, soulless role. When the film premiered, he refused to promote it and did not bother to hide his contempt from the press. Bitterly, that loathing is etched on screen. Ashley Wilkes appears weak and wan, a lost shadow in the storm. And that is not just performance. It is Howard's true attitude. Even when the film became a cinematic masterpiece, he quietly walked away from the spotlight, as if to sever any link with what he called a beautiful deception. What do you think? Can a film be immortal to the world, yet trash to someone who took part in it? And while Howard shook it off, the original author did not accept this cinematic version either. 15. Author Margaret Mitchell saw the film as a betrayal. Margaret Mitchell, the mother of Scarlett O'Hara, followed the adaptation, hoping to see her character step into real life. But when the film was completed, she sank into disappointment. Mitchell was furious that Hollywood turned Scarlett from a complex, conflicted girl, both fragile and strong, into a scheming woman reduced to coldness and ambition. She once confided to friends that watching the film was like seeing a stranger with my child's face. That remark laid bare the betrayal she felt, as her brainchild was distorted by Hollywood into a ticket-selling product. And while the author suffered, other stars had faced humiliations from the very audition phase. See, Katharine Hepburn endured a heavy humiliation at her audition. Katharine Hepburn, one of the most powerful stars of 1930s Hollywood, walked into Selznick's office with ironclad confidence. She declared bluntly, "I am Scarlett O'Hara," but instead of agreement, Hepburn took a brutal hit of humiliation. With a cutting tongue, Selznick replied, "I cannot imagine Rhett Butler chasing you for 12 years. The room fell into a deadly silence. Hepburn flushed, quietly left, carrying a shame she never spoke of in public again. That moment became a bitter Hollywood anecdote, proving that in that glittering world, no one, not even A-list stars, could avoid raw humiliation. And humiliation did not only come from words. At times, it exploded right in the middle of the set. 17. The director cursed Vivien Leigh straight to her face on set. Victor Fleming, notorious for his coarse temper, clashed repeatedly with Vivien Leigh, a refined, proud Englishwoman. In one tense moment, he lost control and shouted straight at the leading lady, "Stick the script up your aristocratic English ass!" The set went dead quiet. That insult was like a slap across an already stifling atmosphere. Leigh was stunned, yet had to go on acting in choking anger. With Selznick pressing from behind and Fleming rough in front, Leigh was trapped between two harsh jaws. The opulent scenes on screen were bought with tears, endurance, and silent humiliation. And as if that were not enough, Selznick's bizarre fixation on the leading lady's appearance made things heavier still. 18. The producer's bizarre obsession with Vivien Leigh's body. Selznick did not just run production, he was obsessed to the point of controlling Vivien Leigh's very body. Night after night, he called in makeup experts just to discuss eye colour, lip colour, breast shape, even corset measurements. Leigh's private details became data in Selznick's mind, hauled out and scrutinised to a pathological degree. Already self-punishing her body for the role, Vivien Leigh now bore added pressure from this pathological fixation. The set grew even heavier, each shot like another dissection, not only by the camera, but by an invisible supervisory gaze. But the tragedy did not end there, for even the film's roaring success became a curse for some actors. 19. Success became a curse for many actors. Gone with the Wind brought blazing glory, but also buried many careers. Butterfly McQueen, who played the maid Prissy, was boxed into stereotyped roles. She never escaped the timid maid image and ultimately left Hollywood in bitterness. Even Vivien Leigh, the biggest star, had to carry the shadow of Scarlett O'Hara like shackles, struggling to find other roles worthy of her. What chills people is this: the very thing the world praises becomes the cage that imprisons those who made it. Do you think that sometimes success is not a door opening, but a locked cage for a lifetime? And a greater tragedy still lay with the very man who made this film. 20. Selznick drowned in obsession after the glory. David O. Selznick, who dared to stake his career to make Gone with the Wind, never found that glory again. After the summit, he plunged into a string of blockbusters, pouring in money and strength, but all fizzled. No work could reach legendary heights again. Haunted by the past, Selznick seemed pursued by the ghost of himself. He lived his remaining years in failure, addiction, and bitterness, and then died in obscurity. A tragic end for a man who once lit up all of Hollywood. That is the full stop, and also a warning for every cinematic halo. Behind the blinding light, there are always shadows that swallow people whole. Gone with the Wind is truly an immortal cinematic monument, transcending all boundaries of time. Every frame, every line exudes overwhelming grandeur and delicacy. This is not just a work, but a symphony of storytelling, of history and emotion. No matter how much drama lies behind it, the film still deserves to be an eternal masterpiece in the hearts of audiences. If you find this video interesting, do not forget to press like and share so more people can know. And please hit subscribe to continue accompanying us and discover more shocking truths behind other cinematic legends.